And now at noon, we are sticking with our continuing coverage on the small plane crash that killed 7 people, including NASCAR legends Greg Biffle and veteran Craig Wadsworth. We are now deep diving into other NASCAR-related plane crashes as our Cam Gaskins reports flying to races, sponsor meetings, and appearances across the country has long been part of the sports culture.
One of the earliest and most well-known cases came on April 1st, 1993. NASCAR Cup Series champion Alan Kulwicki was killed when the small plane he was on board crashed near Bristol Motor Speedway in Tennessee. 2 others closely connected to his team were also killed. Investigators later cited icing conditions and pilot spatial disorientation as the contributing factors. A little more than a decade later came one of the darkest days in NASCAR history. On October 24, 2004, a Hendrick Motorsports aircraft crashed into Bull Mountain in Patrick County, Virginia. The Beechcraft Super King Air was flying from Concord, North Carolina to Martinsville for race weekend. The plane went down during a missed approach in poor weather. All 10 people on board were killed, including members of the Hendrick family, team executives, and crew members. Another prominent figure in the sport has survived multiple aviation accidents. Hall of Famer Jack Roush, a longtime team owner whose organization Greg Biffle once drove for, was seriously injured in a plane crash on April 19, 2002. It was his 60th birthday. The aircraft Roush was piloting struck power lines and crashed into a lake near Troy, Alabama. He was knocked unconscious and submerged, but was rescued by a nearby resident who pulled him from the wreckage and performed CPR. Roush was involved in another crash years later. In July 2010, the small aircraft he was piloting struck the runway during landing in Oshkosh, Wisconsin during an air show. He survived but suffered serious injuries. And one of the most recent high-profile incidents involved one of NASCAR's biggest names. Dale Earnhardt Jr. survived a plane crash on August 15, 2019, when his Cessna Citation business jet overran the runway while landing at Elizabethton Municipal Airport in Tennessee and burst into flames. Earnhardt Jr., his wife Amy, their daughter Isla, and 2 pilots were able to escape. No one was killed.
Cam Gaskins, WBTV on your side.